Gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight for the budget information session. As you know that we've started this yesterday. We were at USP yesterday in the morning and then at University of Fiji in the afternoon. Tonight we're here. Tomorrow we are at Vunimono High School. Then on Saturday, we're at JJ's in Suva, and then of course we go on to Navua and then to the Western Division and then Vanolevu eventually. Why these sessions is because, as you know, we started a few years ago having budget consultations prior to the budget. And people used to have their input and say what they wanted in the budget. We used to give them information about what generally is considered when we actually formulate a budget. We were then, of course, asked by a number of people to say, look, once you've actually done the budget, we don't know what's there specifically, so why don't you come back and tell us what's exactly in the budget and people can find out, because sometimes when the budget is presented in Parliament, people tend to miss some of the major points. So the whole idea is for you to be able to hear from us what are the key aspects of the budget, and then of course it gives you an opportunity to ask any specific questions you want to know about the budget. What we'll do today is give you some of the key initiatives that's been announced in the budget and some of the economic facts surrounding the budget and also around the economy itself, so we know exactly where we are, why we do things, what are the things that we do actually take into consideration when formulating a budget. So we'll start off with the first page. So if you have any questions, let's keep it till the end and then you can ask any questions you like. Please don't hesitate to ask any question. It's open season. You can question anything you like. So the major initiatives, of course, the national budget, the way we've been doing that is that the whole idea, the focus was to improve Fijian lives. It's of course not just done through this budget, we've been doing it throughout the past number of years that we've been formulating budget. As a second point highlights that we've been focused very much on infrastructure development, on education. In this year's budget, we've allocated over $1 billion to the education sector. We've of course continued our focus on health and access to water, electricity and social protection. And the idea is of course to build upon the 9 years of straight growth we've had. And I explained to you why, when we talk about having 9 years of straight growth, what are the implications? What happens when you actually have 9 years of straight growth? We of course had growth in Fiji previously after independence. But what we actually found is that you may have, say, a couple of years of growth, then you have a decrease in growth. In fact, you have negative growth. So when you have this sort of seesaw approach to growth in the economy, it does not lead to confidence, nor does it lead to, for example, long-term sustainability of jobs, etc. And I'll explain that to you later on. So what are the major initiatives? So as announced, you would have seen in yesterday's Fiji Sun that we have started this initiative of $1,000 per baby. When a baby is born, you have to have a parental income of less than $30,000 a year. Otherwise, you don't qualify. If you earn more than that, you don't qualify. It's more targeted more towards low-income families, and of course, you get to open up the account. There are a couple of reasons behind this. Of course, one of the major ones is to provide support to low-income families. Because you know, when a baby is born, it's a new expenditure, so things like buying diapers or whatever the case may be for the baby, you have access to funds. And the second thing, of course, is there are certain requirements that in order for you to get the $1,000, you have to ensure that you register the baby first. In Fiji, we have a tendency, many people tend to register their babies when they go to class 1. So 6 years later, they go and register them. A few years ago, we did a sweep around Fiji, and we found that there was something like 25,000 Fijians who weren't registered, did not have a birth certificate, and some of them were old as 45 years old, as 55 years old. So they spend nearly half their life or more than 3/4 of their life without a birth certificate. Obviously that's not good. It's not good for us in terms of determining, for example, planning processes, in terms of data collation, etc. It's not good to have a situation where people don't register. So this will also, in a way, make us a lot more efficient, save funds. You know, when before school starts now, if you go to just a few weeks before school starts, you only see the birthdays and marriages open till on Saturdays, open in the evenings, because everybody's rushing to register their children. This will actually save that from happening. And you can open that in an account. Of course, the second $500 you don't get to use until the child goes to year 1. and then you can access the second $500. Of course, it does not stop you in the meantime to utilize that account to put in money. You know, for the child's first birthday, somebody gives some money, you can put money into the account. So we're trying to create a culture of savings also. In Fiji, we're not very good at saving. So we're trying to create a culture of savings. Maternity leave, of course, is now increased from 84 days to 98 working days. This is applicable. It's not only for government employees, but across Fiji. Anywhere you work, your employer, if you're a female, of course, only males can't get pregnant, so only females, when they fall pregnant and they go on maternity leave, they're entitled to 98 working days. After 3 pregnancies, as the law currently stood then, as the law stands now, you then have half of what you're entitled to. But for the first 3 pregnancies, you're entitled to 98 working days. We now have a 5 days paternity leave also. So this is applicable for the fathers of babies. So they're entitled to now take 5 days off for paternity leave. Obviously, not everybody's going to take paternity leave because not all males will become fathers at all in a rush. So whenever there is a child is born and they're the father of the child, they can take 5 days off, either during the maternity leave time or post the birth or postnatal. 5 days family care leave. This, of course, is separate leave. So there are a lot of people. For example, I could be going home and then I find out that my son has had an accident, and I have to go and spend time with him in the hospital. You may need to take a few days off, or your wife gets sick, or your father gets sick. That's the type of leave you're entitled to for family care leave. We know generally a lot of people, they tend to take the annual leave off for these types of things. So this is the idea, is to get people to use the annual leave for what it is entitled for, which is the annual leave, and this is essentially for any family issues that may arise. Of course, it's an additional cost, if you like, for the employer. So we have said that any employer that pays these salaries or wages for the paternity days and the family care days leave, they get 150% tax deduction. So it helps employers. It's not an additional financial burden on them. Of course, government, it won't be applicable to government because government does not pay taxes. Now, funding for education, you can very quickly see that this is where free education was introduced in 2014, where we had TELs and toppers, and of course free education all the way from primary school to high school. And then that continued. Of course, the reason why it goes up is because more people get into universities. But this has essentially gone up over here because of the Cyclone Winston upgrade. We had a few $100 million in that funding, but now, of course, we've done, of this, about $90 million is in the rebuild, and I'll show you in the next page. So you can see, out of that $1.035 billion, $535.4 million goes to the Ministry of Education directly. So it pays for the teachers' salaries, pays for the school bus fares, pays for all the other expenses related to the general running of schools, even the capital grants they give to various schools. $123.8 million is given to higher education institutions. Of that, 104 is operating grants, so we give USP 33 million, University of Fiji 4.2, FNU 65.1, and various other institutions like Vivekananda College is 200,000, Sangam 200, Montfort Boys Town 700, etc. Corpus Christi 1, Fulton 1.1, sorry. And then capital grants to higher education. The only higher education institution we give actually capital grants to is FNU. The FNU is completely dependent on government. So all the lecturers' salaries, all capital grants comes from government, whereas USP is different. They get their funding from other regional governments, they get their funding from other bilateral partners, whereas FNU is completely dependent on government. And we recognize the fact that FNU needs a lot more input into it. Of course, as you know, that some of the salaries that were being paid to lecturers at FNU for a period of time was less compared to what lecturers are getting at USP. So obviously you won't necessarily get all lecturers wanting to apply to FNU. So if the salaries are comparable, then you'll have people applying to both universities. Also, we need to upgrade the capital works. So you can see over here, Lambasa campus, we're spending $6 million to build a new campus. FNU campus in Nasinu will get an upgrade. Putting in vet labs, hospital, livestock shed. This is Coronivia, and Maritime Academy is getting $5 million. $90 million is for the rehab of schools. This is for payment of all the completion of all the schools that were damaged, not just in Winston, but the other two cyclones we had recently, Josie, etc. In national toppers, we are spending $43.8 million. That's how much it's costing us for this year alone, for the new financial year. TELS is $205.6 million. These are fees essentially and the allowances that we pay to the universities and also the students. And civil service scholarships, I'll elaborate on that later on because we've got a number of new scholarships for civil servants. And other scholarships and training is about $7.2 million. Now, we've increased the number of toppers from 630 to 970. How is that made up of? So you have your traditional toppers areas. That's gone up from 630 to 950. Your year 13 foundation, etc. You qualify for that. We've also added a new 20 scholarships here for people who want to study after they leave year 13 in areas of study or disciplines that are not available in Fiji. So if your son or daughter leaves year 13 and wants to become an architect, there's no university in Fiji that has a degree or bachelor's in architecture. So if they get a place in a university overseas, we'll actually fund that, assuming that they're one of the 20s. Of course, things like clinical psychologists, speech therapists, actuarial studies, genetic science, architecture, town planning, biomedical engineering, all of these areas, there's absolutely no degree courses available in Fiji. So we can offer that to them also. We also have now, there's a huge focus on teachers because current assessments indicate that we have a huge shortage of teachers, and going forward now, in the next few years, there'll be a huge shortage of teachers in maths and physics and various science subjects. And of course, we also have a huge, our quality of English in Fiji has deteriorated significantly compared to, say, what it was in the 70s and 80s. So we want to get our teachers and various other educationists to actually upgrade themselves in that space. There are also a lot of good teachers who have diplomas, but they don't have degrees. So what we've said here is that we'll give 30 awards for teachers holding a diploma to upgrade to a bachelor's degree in the areas of maths and physics, language and literature, which is English, information technology, industrial arts, special education, early childhood education. We'll also have 20 awards for teachers who hold a bachelor's and upgrade to a postgraduate degree, a PhD level, in teachers in maths, physics, language and literature. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, which is many decades ago, where you had teachers who had masters who used to teach at high school. It's very rare now to find, say, a teacher holding a master's degree in, say, English, teaching in a high school. So we want that level of qualification to creep back or come back into a high school system. So that's what those awards are there for. We've also got some 10 overseas awards for postgraduate studies. Again, the priority areas are teacher training, tourism and agriculture, fisheries and forestry. We need a lot of people in the fisheries and forestry space too. So there will be 40 awards for masters, of which 20 are reserved for civil servants. 20 we'll give to people in the private sector, because we want Fijians also in the private sector to be well qualified. They may be very good in their particular field. They may be in areas of fisheries and forestry, agriculture, even in tourism. And we will also award 10 PhDs, of which 5 will be reserved for civil servants and 5 will be for people in the private sector. So for example, you may have some engineer in the private sector wanting to do a PhD in some particular specific area that's relevant for our economy. So we can award that particular scholarship to them. Special children, as you know, for special needs children, we actually already funding that, but they did not get the full scholarship, so we'll be now giving that to them. Slight change to the TELS, well, actually significant change. Before, if you had TELS, and you were only entitled to allowances, daily or living allowances, if your parents earned $25,000 or less. Now we've increased the threshold to $50,000. So if your parents earn less than $50,000, you'll be entitled to the allowances we give you in TELS. We've also increased the bus fares for tertiary students to $30 a week, because some of them travel, say, from Navua to Suva, or maybe Baf to Lautoka, etc. And there is also, we've got a new category of 30 places for graduates to get entry into MBBS. There are many people who have done science. They may be working as scientists or in some science lab, or maybe working as a pharmacist. We also want them, if they want to become doctors, give them the opportunity to do so, because we also have a shortage of doctors. So some people can upgrade themselves and become doctors. Now, with the TELs, with the TELs, as you know, there is a debt. So what we've done, we've been actually studying this for the past few years, and what we've come up with is this. If you have a TELS debt that's less than $20,000, and if you pay your debt in less than 2 years or less, then we'll forgive 50% of your debt. If you pay 50% of the debt, then we forgive the balance of the debt, which is the other 50%. If you have, most students who do a bachelor's degree fall within number 2 category, 20,000 to 49,000. If they pay 50% of their debt in less than 3 years or 3 years or less, then we forgive the other 50%. So what you call accelerated payment system, repayment initiative. So the way we've looked at it is this, is that if they take their full time to pay their debt of this debt here, it can take them 10, 15 years. So by the time they actually pay us, the value of the dollar they give us won't be as much. Because you know that most people don't pay interest in TELS. If a family has a low income, we don't charge an interest. The maximum interest that's payable is only 2%. No bank will give you any amount of that kind of money for 2%, and without any security also. So it's quite, attractive terms of debt. But the reality is, ladies and gentlemen, that it is a debt and it needs to be paid. But we said that if you pay 50% in that period of time, we forgive the other 50%. But we cannot afford to have free tertiary education. It's a political gimmick to say that. Already the debt from TELS and toppers is in excess of $700 million. 50% of the population in Fiji is below the age of 27. It may sound good to people who are in university now saying, okay, we'll forgive your debt. But what will happen to the other people who are still coming down the track? And remember, these people who are at the moment 25 years old, 23 years old, they'll also start making babies very soon. Right? So who's going to pay for their education? And at the moment, the political landscape, people are talking only about universities. None of these political parties are talking about high schools. You can go to certain high schools in Fiji, they don't even have a science lab. Some of them don't even have a computer, they've never used a computer. So you see, it's very interesting to see how some of these politicians are talking about only university students, because university students actually vote. They're not talking about the overall education spend and where the focus should be. We should be actually investing not just in universities, but also investing in our primary and high schools. If you go to certain places in Vanuatu, in various other parts in Fiji, the poor kids have holes on the floor. There are frogs coming in through the walls or through the floors. So there's some very basic issues that need to be addressed, and that's where investment needs to be. So if we really are sincere about education, we will be spanning out our education spend and focusing on primary and secondary education, of course also in universities too. This was advertised in today's Fiji Sun, as you would have seen. The first home buyers, so first purchase grant, first home purchase grant. So those of you who have not bought your first home and you earn less than $50,000 a year, if you want to buy your first home, you go to a bank, you may see a house, you apply for a loan, and the bank says, yes, we approve the loan, and say, by the way, I want to apply for this grant. You will get the grant. You simply fill out the form at the bank, and the bank sends it to the Ministry of Housing, they do the assessment, and then send it back to you, as long as the bank approves the loan. If you're building your first home, we give you $15,000. Why are we focusing more on building? It's because when you build things, it creates a lot of jobs. And also we need to increase the stockpile of homes. There's a shortage of stockpile of homes in Fiji, huge shortage. So this is why we've got the grant. Now, if you earn between 50,000 and 100,000, I see some teachers here, so you may have couples who may be teachers. They of course now got a pay rise. So if you combine a couple's teacher salary it's more than $50,000. So they'll qualify under this second bracket. You'll get $10,000 for the construction of a new home or $5,000. It's a grant. It's not a loan, it's a grant. That means once you get it, you don't pay us back. We want you to be going happy and have your house. The reality is that many people, because they don't own a home, they fall into the debt trap. Because as you know, your home is really your asset. A lot of people go to money lenders in Fiji. So they may want to go, say they want to borrow for $3,000, $5,000. They go to a mainstream bank, they say, no, do you have an asset which can use as collateral? They say, no, we don't. So they run off to the money lenders. And many of you, I don't know if you've seen this, well, I've seen it because, you know, when you get your monies put into your bank account, your salary, it normally hits your bank account at about 3:30 a.m. in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. That's when your money, your account gets credited. Within 1 hour, you have seen the footage, you'll see all these money lenders turn up in their cars, this many ATM cards with all the PIN numbers. And they're taking out all the money. Because that's the collateral that money lenders use. They ask you for your ATM card. And then you go and queue up in the day in the bank. That's why the queues get long. So we want to avoid that. And of course you pay a lot of interest for that. And we have to change our concept of what is a home. We think a home is one block of land with a house in the middle of the land. No. A home can be all of this. You can have flats, which you can own. That's what most countries do. So you have a 99-year lease over the land, or over the flat. That's your own home. And we need to get into that space because the cost of buying your own home will actually come down. The moment you buy your own flat, you, for example, I could be a teacher and I'm single, I'm earning $25,000, I may be able to buy a one-bedroom flat of my own. When I get married, I may want to move into a two-bedroom house. I sell that, I must get a good resale value, then I can move it to a bigger house. Or I may actually buy a home with land on it. That's the whole idea. And that's the culture we're trying to create. Of course, we've got an agreement with the banks too that the Reserve Bank of Fiji is now lending at 1% to those banks that apply for it. And if you're a low-income family, less than $50,000, your interest rate will be 5% or less. We have now in this budget allocated $1 million to say we'll subsidize your interest rate by 1 more percent. So if you're paying interest rate of 4.5%, you'll pay 3.5% because we'll pay the 1% for you to make it more attractive and encourage more low-income people to get the homes. First land purchase. Again, we have a lot of people who want to buy land. In particular, this is for those people who want to buy a lease. A lot of people are able to get Ethiopia land or state land, but they don't have the money to pay for the lease. You know that normally you pay $12,000, $15,000 to get the lease, and then you make annual lease payments. So we've said we'll help those people to be able to buy those leases. They'll of course spur growth. I mentioned the interest rate subsidy. We have $750,000 covering the cost of land surveys. There are many areas in Fiji where people have not got proper leases because the land has not been surveyed. So places like in Vudi and various other places, a lot of the land has not been surveyed, so they cannot get a proper lease. So we will now, you make an application, it's all in today's papers, and we pay for the survey cost. In fact, government can outsource it itself, and then people can get proper leases. And again, you know, we'll continue with the issuance of proper leases. The social housing, 1/3, 2/3, you'll get more information on that later on. Now, one of the new things that we're doing now is, of course, you know, FNTC levy, those of you know about that. Every employer in Fiji, for the past number of, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, has had to pay 1% of the salary bill they have to pay towards FNTC. Even government does that. So whatever, say, if you're paying, you know, all your staff in your company, say, $1,000, that's the salary you pay on a weekly basis, 1% of that, which is $10, must go towards FNTC. Now, FNTC then uses that money to run courses, but also if you then train your staff, you can claim back that money also. What we found, many small businesses cannot do that. In fact, they do not do that at all. So once they give the money, it's gone. They don't make use of it. Because we're introducing a number of new initiatives that need to be funded, we've restructured that. So everybody will continue to pay that 1% FNTC levy. But what will happen, 50% of that FNTC levy will go towards what we're introducing from the 1st of Jan of next year is what we call expanding access to private general practitioners. What that means is this. You live in this area, there are many private GPs here, doctors who have their own surgeries. So instead of going to the Valelevu Health Center, you can go to the GP. I wake up in the morning, I've got a sore throat, I've got a runny nose, I want to go and see a doctor, maybe I want some antibiotics or the doctor to see me and tell me what's wrong with me. I can go to the local GP. I'll go to the local GP, and the fee for that will not be paid by you, it will be paid by us. Where will we get the money from? It will come from there. See, a lot of people saying, oh, you're giving all these things, but there's no funding. This is where the funding is coming from, because we've been clever about where we're going to get the money from. So we collect at the moment $21 million from FNTC levy. So 50% of that, which is about $11 million, will go towards paying for that. You see, because if everybody over here, in this area, say Nandera area, they cannot afford to go and see a GP at the moment, they all turn up to Valelevu Health Center. What do you have at Valelevu Health Center? Long queues in the morning. So in order to avoid that, you go to a local GP. We'll pay for that. If you have what we call a complex medical problem, something that's sophisticated, then you go to the CWM, or you go to Valelevu Health Center, etc. That's what it'll do. It'll also mean that we can encourage GPs to go into areas where currently there are no GPs. In Korovo, there's no private doctor. So people in Korovo have to go to Nasuru if you want to see a private doctor. Or you go to the Korovo Health Center. There's no private doctor in Nambuwalu, no private doctor in Nasorawanga. I don't think there's any private doctor in Senganga. So they all go to the health center, or they have to catch the bus or take a car and go to Lambasa to see a private doctor. So in this way, it'll encourage private doctors to go into areas where they currently aren't. So generally what happens in most countries where they have the system, you'll get assigned a doctor. So if I live in this Nandera area, there may be 3 or 4 doctors, so you'll get one doctor, I'll go and see them. So my family will all go and see them. So they become my family doctor. So when my son is 1 year old, he'll see the doctor. When my son is 7 years old, he'll see the doctor. He knows the family history now. Of course, if you move to Latoka, you'll have another doctor that's assigned there. This is what they do overseas, essentially. That's what we're trying to do. We're working with ADB at the moment, and these policies will be rolled out by the 1st of Jan, and you can go and see a private GP from the 1st of Jan. Now, the other 40% of that $21 million, from the 1st of Jan again, as you know that we set up the Accident Compensation Commission of Fiji for a third-party insurance. Before we had the old laws. So if you have a kid that's crossing the road over here and gets hit by a bus, but he ran in front of the bus, under the old laws they would not get paid because it was the child's fault, because he ran in front of the bus. That's what you call a system that identifies fault. Now the law is there's a no-fault system. He died on the road, he got hit by a motor vehicle, he gets paid out. You get injured, you get paid out. You need to establish that's what happened on the road, and you get the payment out. So we already established that. So from the 1st of Jan, we're introducing workers' compensation. They'll come as part of the no-fault system under the ACCF. So I'm working in a factory where I'm using machines. I'm sewing the timber. Accidentally, my finger slips and my finger gets chopped off. So under the old system, you have to go and report it. Sometimes you get lawyers. The company may not have workers' compensation, although they're supposed to have it. Under this system, there'll be a price for every limb. That's what they do overseas. If I'm right-handed, my right thumb gets cut off, there's a particular price to it. And I'll get $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is, I get that paid out to me. In no less, without any lawyers, without any litigation. Of course, if I want more money, I can go to the court if I want. But of course, that needs to be funded. So the funding for that comes from that levy there. 40% of that will go there towards the workers' comp. 10% will continue to remain with the FNTC to provide that service that they currently are providing. At the moment, the FNTC trust has about $30 million in it. We've also put in place what we call bundle insurance for civil servants, members of disciplined forces, and social welfare recipients. It's a very basic insurance which has already been rolled out to sugarcane farmers, dairy farmers, copra farmers, rice farmers. They already have this insurance. So it's a basic insurance, and government will pay for the premium. It's costing us only $5 million. But what we'll give is this. If a person who is receiving social welfare at the moment, the reason why they receive social welfare, maybe they're disabled, or maybe they have a particular ailment, they cannot work. So already they do not have very high levels of income. Now, assuming that their house catches fire, how do you think they'll be able to build their house? They'll of course come running to government for assistance. In this way, we are also, as government, protecting ourselves and protecting the person. They will get a payment of $3,000 for house fire, even those living in informal areas. If the person dies, this $3,000 is given to the beneficiary. So husbands on social welfare, he dies, the wife, if she's the nominated beneficiary, will get $3,000 plus $1,000 for funeral expenses. It's very basic cover, but it does provide that immediate relief. We've already seen that happening without much cost. So it's not just about, how people say handout, it's also about government protecting itself. Because it also means that we have access to funds to be able to help people. And we have the insurance system to help us with it. It also is applicable for civil servants, including teachers and everybody else working with the system. We are currently also working with for insurance for homes, in particular in the rural areas. Under the Homes Care, the Josie and Kenny cyclones and Gita cyclones, we paid out in excess of $100 million. Under Help for Homes, under Winston, we paid out about $125 million. Obviously, if you get a cyclone every year, it costs a lot of money, and it's not sustainable to do that. Government cannot keep on forking out money in that fashion. Of course, we know some people also steal from the system, making false declarations. So this over here will help us to actually get a particular type of insurance, what we call parametric insurance. Parametric insurance, the way it works is that if an area is a designated area for cyclone, in other words, the cyclone went down this path, and all the homes within the path will get one single payment made out to them. We don't have to go and do individual assessments of homes. It's what you call parametric insurance. So we're doing a similar thing for crop insurance, and we're hoping, keeping our fingers crossed, we're working with the World Bank and ADB and various other agencies to have that in place by November, because our cyclone season starts in November. And we have allocated in the budget $1 million for the premium payment of this for homes and about $350,000 for crop insurance. Huge focus on digitization, government platform for mobile phone and business processes, again making things like ease of doing business will improve. We're investing about $14 million there. Wirelessly, as you know, now you can get free-to-air television anywhere in Fiji. Even if you live in the southern part of Lau to Rotuma to the inlands of Naitasiri to anywhere in Fiji, you can catch wirelessly. You can catch wirelessly either through terrestrial means or you can buy the dish. Dish is about $250. But we give set-top boxes for free to people who earn less than $30,000 a year. You can get that if you have not got it. And you get 8 channels. We understand there'll be more channels added to it. Once you get the box, you get those channels for free. You don't have to pay any monthly subscription. And the idea is Wirelessly platform also gives us the opportunity to use data both ways. All the FNU campuses will become fully Wi-Fi'd, so Nasinu, etc. Nasinu, we understand, will get Wi-Fi'd fully by next week. Sambula campus, Lotoa campus, all the 22 campuses throughout Fiji of FNU will get Wi-Fi'd. We're also creating what we call Wi-Fi hotspots around Fiji. So you can go to Sukuna Park. We launched it last week. If you go to Sukuna Park, we've geo-fenced it. In other words, within the parameters of that park, the Wi-Fi speed is much faster, the bandwidth is much broader. So we want people to go there, converge, they meet people, they can talk to each other, use the Wi-Fi, and you get 1 hour free of Wi-Fi data usage. We'll be doing that along in Nasinu, we're doing it in Nasori and various other places. The whole idea is to create that environment for people to use technology, because if we don't get ourselves used to technology, we'll get left behind. It's very important to do that. You can also then go and access government services. One of the mobile phone apps that we'll be launching very soon will give the opportunity to even register your child online or on your phones. There are various processes you need to follow to be able to do that. And the other interesting one is this here, which is the promoting electronic transactions. If you go now to a supermarket, if you go down to the supermarket here, and say you buy $100 worth of groceries, and you use your ATM card. You don't have that much cash, you use your ATM card, you swipe the card. That machine is called POS, point of sale machine. When you pay for the $100 worth of groceries, the bank charges you 40 cents transaction fee. Charges you 40 cents transaction fee, charges the supermarket 30 cents merchant fee. So they make 70 cents on each transaction. Now, what we want to do is that we want to be able to make electronic transactions a lot more attractive. I can walk into a shop, any common shop in New Zealand, and I can buy a bottle of water with my ATM card in New Zealand. In Fiji, try doing that, they won't let you do that. Some of them won't have the machines. Some of them will say, even if they have the machine, they'll say, minimum transaction, $10, only then you can use the card, because of the fees they have to pay. So we have an agreement with the banks, and the bank has agreed, we persuaded them, that from the 1st of Jan, you don't have to pay the 40 cents. They waive that fees. Now what we want to do is obviously get them to reduce the fee that the merchants will pay. And we've allocated some funding for that to do some cross-subsidization of that. We also have some funding available, about $700,000 to subsidize for the purchase of POS machines, because many merchants will say, I don't need the machine. So we're saying we'll pay 50% of the cost of that, because more merchants have more machines, more easier for you. You don't have to carry cash. And you also just use your cards. Now, one of the other things a lot of people don't realize, when you do electronic transactions, the money stays in the system, right? So the bank, for example, if I go and I say, assuming I have an account with ANZ, when I swipe my card and I pay for the $100 groceries, the supermarket owner's account may be in Westpac. So the money goes from ANZ to Westpac. The money does not come out of the system. When you physically take out money, the money leaves the system. So when the money is transacted within the system, the cash remains within the system. What does that mean? There's more cash within the system. When there's more cash within the system, it means the cost of getting the cash is less. Which means when you go and borrow money, the interest rate will be low. But if everybody keeps on taking money out of the system, there's less cash in the system, so interest rate will be higher. So that's the other benefit of having more electronic transactions. Because one of the issues in Fiji has been for decades that the cost of funds, or cost of money to borrow has always been very high. And we want to obviously reduce that. And it has actually happened already. Now, health and medical services, again, of course, we're building quite a few things. Also in Balalevu, you'll see some changes very soon. Kidney dialysis, we're setting one up here, I think it's in Nandera. In Nandera, we're setting up a kidney dialysis center, and we're setting one up in Nandi. And what we've said, we've also been studying this. Dr. Krishnan, who's the only nephrologist in Fiji, has told us there's something like about 600 people who need access to kidney dialysis in Fiji. Of course, there are thousands more in Fiji who need access to cardiovascular problems. With heart disease, much bigger problem in Fiji. A lot more people die of heart diseases than in any other illness, and including, of course, diabetes. Now, the issue here is that what we've said, we'll subsidize the cost of kidney dialysis services by 50% for those people who earn less than $30,000. Now, we've done that because obviously low-income people cannot pay for it. We've been studying that, and so we subsidize 50%. There are many private agencies that do want to pay the other 50%, and I'll see a lot of people doing that and setting up foundations, etc. But it's also a fine balance too. As you know, if we say from tomorrow onwards all dialysis will be free, then all these young ladies over here might start drinking as much Coke and eating all sweet things. They might as well do it. If my kidneys fail on me, they'll pay for it in any case. So we have to be able to arrest that problem. There needs to be a certain level of responsibility given to individuals. But we're setting up these dialysis centers in Suva and Nandi. A free medicine program, of course. What used to happen in free medicine, if you go to a private pharmacy, we used to give them the stock, then they give it to you. We're now changing the rules where they will actually give you the stock, then they invoice us. It makes it a lot easier, saves them from keeping the stock. We're doing a public-private partnership. The PS, sorry, I also forgot to mention, the PS Economy is here with me, Makreta Kondote. Shiri Gandra is here with me also. He's the head of fiscal policy in the Ministry of Economy. Kamal Gandra is here, is also in planning. And of course, the other two people who could not be here tonight is the head of our debt management is Pankaj Singh, and the head of budget is Isoa Talemembao, who looks after the day-to-day functioning of the budget spend. So we were recently actually in India just about a week ago, where we met up with various interested parties regarding the public-private partnership. That will be set up in Ba and Lotoka using the existing facilities. Ba, as you know, has a new structure. We have certain conditions attached to that. Whoever is a new partner, or whoever is going to be, the medical provider, will partner up with FNPF, but they need to provide certain services that currently aren't available. So like I mentioned, they need to provide 24/7 open heart surgery services. At the moment, if any one of us has a heart attack now, there's no Fijian doctor that can cut you open and play around with your heart and set your heart and get it right. There's nobody here who can do that. Everybody has to go overseas. You have to go to India, you go to Australia, New Zealand, whatever it is. So we need that service available in Fiji. The other requirement is, of course, for cancer patients, things like chemotherapy, oncology, etc. That also is part of the condition. Part of the condition, they'll also build a new wing in Lotoka Hospital. They have a new operating theatre where students can actually view the surgeries as they are going on, etc. So that's part of the public-private partnership. And of course, as I mentioned, expanding access to GPs is effective from the 1st of Jan 2019. Our Ministry of Sugar, again, I don't want to go into too much details. Most of you aren't sugarcane farmers, but you may have relatives who are sugarcane farmers. The reality is that what we are focused on is more on what we call the input cost. If we are able to reduce the input cost, then we are able to increase the margin of those people who will be reaping or harvesting the sugarcane. So some people are saying we'll give $100 a ton. There's no point in giving somebody $100 a ton when it costs you about $90 to make the sugarcane. So if you're able to reduce your costs, and if your cost to produce the sugarcane is say $50, and you're getting $83 a ton, then your margin, of course, will be $33 a ton. So that's the way we're looking at it. So this is why we've introduced things like, for example, the weedicide, fertilizer subsidy, etc., new farmer assistance. We've also set up a sugar stabilization fund together with FSC. And the stabilization fund means that for the next 3 years, we're guaranteeing a price of $83 a ton. Which means irrespective of the world market price, the farmer will get $83 a ton. So the farmer knows exactly, is not subject to world market prices, will get $83 a ton. So they can plan. And the way that the stabilization fund works is that you have a reserve funds that should the world market price say be less than $83, then that reserve fund actually supplements that gap. And the farmer gets $83 a ton. And FSC, of course, has sold some assets, the real estate that will use that funds, and government, of course, will pitch in too. Very quickly, before we round off, we've also set aside $1 million for the local goat meat industry. It's a very important initiative, we believe. If today in Fiji, if Crest chicken shut down, we won't be able to produce enough chicken. We have to import chicken. Today we don't import chicken, fundamentally. If Crest and Rooster went, we're completely gone. So you have one company that actually holds our ability to supply chicken meat to ourselves. And it's not Crest that actually only produces chicken. Crest also farms it out to villages, farmers. They have their own little coops. They give them the chicks. They say, look, here's the chick. You breed it. When it reaches this particular, 36 weeks, 34 weeks, whatever it is, when it gets to that age, we'll buy it from you at this price. So the farmer knows, okay, I'll do it, I'll make a margin. We need to do a similar thing in the goat industry too. Because that's a lean meat, it's a healthy meat. Everybody eats goat in Fiji, and we need to have good substitute for meats too. There's already a farmer between Ba and Tabu, there's already got 1,000 goats. Now he is willing to actually rear the small baby goats are called kids. So willing to give kids to farmers, maybe a sugarcane farmer or a villager or whatever it is, give them 5 or 10 kids, you grow it, I'll buy it from you at that price. And you should be able to then go to the supermarket and buy fresh goat meat. You know how you have seal pack? There's a lot of demand for it. So that's one of the areas that we're providing funding to. Brucellosis-free farms, as you know that we had TB and brucellosis in our cattle. So the approach has been, this is one farm, there's about 5 animals that are affected, we take out those 5 cows. But the way it should be done, as they've done overseas, you have one farm that may have 5 cows affected, you kill the entire stock, you repasture the entire farm, That way you're able to get rid of the disease a lot quicker. So that's the funding that's been made available for that. Many civil service reforms, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into that. We are having performance management systems put in place. Individual civil servants will get assessed and the payments will be made around about the beginning of next year, backdated to the 1st of August of this year. Itoki Affairs Board, they've given a pay rise because these are not directly civil servants, but we actually pay for them. And also the provincial council staff, they've also received a pay rise in alignment with civil service reforms. Very quickly, STT, ECAL, we've increased the income introduction threshold. You only pay STT and ECAL if you're going to stay at a hotel, if you rent a car, if you watch a movie, if you go and drink beer at a pub, or if you go and eat at an expensive restaurant, say in Denver or somewhere. You don't pay STT and ECAL anywhere else. I saw some literature by some political party at some campaign meeting. As you know, they've started their campaigns. And they said, we'll bring down the price of groceries by 16% by removing STT and ECAL. Well, that's nonsense. Because there's no STT and ECAL on groceries. There's a lot of misinformation about that. But what we've said is that ECAL and STT won't be payable in those business areas should the business earn $1.25 million or less. So maybe I have a small motel. I have 5 rooms. I normally, rent it out. So if I earn less than $1.25 million, the STT and ECAL won't be applicable to my business. Or if I have a small pub, then it won't be applicable to me. As I said, again, the wages and salaries, 150% tax deduction for paternity and family care leave. If you train your staff, you can claim 150% tax deduction. Anybody, engineers, whoever it is, that send their staff for training, they can claim 150% tax deduction. Again, we've tried to incentivize the ICT and renewable energy sectors. If you have research and development, if your company does that, your business does that, you get a 250% tax deduction. And we've increased the scope of ICT. If you invest in ICT at the moment, we give you tax holidays. There's a lot of opportunities for us in that space. We can talk more about that. If you go to the example I was used, if you go to Tapu City now in Suva, if you look out from Tapu City up Cumming Street, Mark Street, you see all the buildings, they look very ugly. A lot of those buildings have not been painted well for a long time. They need to be upgraded. So if they actually upgrade, then they also get a 25% investment allowance. Of course, if they do it in Nasinu too, they'll get a 25% discount. We're hosting the biggest gathering ever next year in Fiji. The Asian Development Bank is bringing the annual meeting to Fiji. There'll be about 4,500 people who will descend on Nandi for 1 week. A lot of opportunities for us. So if anybody wants to sponsor that, if they do sponsor, they get a 150% tax deduction. Anybody brings in electric buses, we have a 55% capital deduction for that. If you set up electric charging station, you get 5% subsidy for the setup of electric charging stations. Minimum investment of $100,000. We currently are talking to ADB and various other people as to how we can introduce electric buses in Fiji to reduce our carbon footprint. Obviously, a lot cleaner way to travel too. We've reduced zero-rated duty on all these imported fruits and vegetables. Things like pomegranates, pears, apples, plums, and all of those sorts of things. Used to be 32%, sorry, a few years ago. We brought it down to 15 and brought it down to 5, and now we've zero-rated it. We don't grow these things in Fiji, generally speaking, so we need to make it a lot more cheaper and accessible. Tea, the duty has been reduced from 5% to 0%. And we introduced a new duty or excise duty on carbonated drinks, your Cokes and your lemonades and Sprites and Sprints and whatever. But what people started doing, businesses, they started bringing cheaper imported carbonated drinks. So we've now put a new specific duty on that of $2 per litre. Of course, cigarettes and alcohol has gone up by 15%. Plastic bags. The levy has gone up from yesterday, from 10 cents to 20 cents. Please pay your 20 cents if you use a plastic bag. But it's a wonderful way to avoid the 20 cents. Take your own bag. Take your own bag. There's a lot of bags available. A lot of women actually sew these. A lot of women's clubs sew bags. You can take those bags with you. From 2020, there'll be a complete ban on plastics. I just recently read an article, just in fact 2 days ago, where a whale, I think somewhere near UK, it could not swim anymore and they caught it. It died. When they cut its stomach open, they found 4 kilograms of plastic inside the stomach. You'll be surprised how much of plastic is actually in our marine life. And obviously we need to play our part, so that's why we're banning plastic bags altogether. Of course, it caused a lot of, aesthetic problems too. As you know, that in Fiji, to import a vehicle, a second-hand vehicle, it cannot be anything older than 5 years. Now, what we found is that a lot of the car dealers, they'll bring in cars that are like 4 years and 11 months, 4 years and 8 months. So the reason why we want actually newer vehicles is because newer vehicles have newer technology. When they have newer technology, they have greater fuel efficiency, less carbon footprint, less emissions out in the air. So in order to encourage these car dealers to bring in cars that are much newer, we have said if you import a car that is 2 years or younger, instead of paying 32% duty, you'll actually pay 15% duty. Similarly with taxis, taxis pay of course half the rate, and now they'll pay even further 50% reduction if they bring in the taxis that are 2 years or younger. Just very quickly, because I like to open up the floor for questions. This is what I meant about economic growth. See, over here we have had 9 years of consecutive growth. Every year the economy has been growing. Because of that, our GDP has gone up. The value of our GDP is about $11.3 billion. Used to be in 2008 only $5.6 billion. It's almost doubled because of these 9 years of growth. You can see over here, the economy contracted 11 times in this 38-year period, but you can look at how much the GDP grew by. Very modest. Over here, because there has been no interruption to the growth, it's gone up to $11.3 billion. So that's the significance about having consecutive growth. You can see that here. So, right from 2010, it's been growing every year. Because of Winston, it grew only at 0.4, but the fact is, nonetheless, it grew. Now, Winston cost about $1.3 billion US for us. Very significant cyclone. But the fact of the matter is, it's grown. We are now projected to grow for another 3 years, at least at 3.4, 3.2, 3.2 again. Now, what's happening as a result of that? Unemployment rate has gone down to 4.5%. As a result of which 40,000 jobs have been created in the last 5 years. And the way that they measure that, of course, is that the RBF until 2014 used to only look at the advertisements in the Fiji Times. From 2014, they started looking at the advertisements in Fiji Times and Fiji Sun. And you can see the growth of jobs has been 23,385. Advertisements, sorry. If you look at also FNPF, this green bit here indicates new compulsory membership. So anybody who joins the workforce becomes a new member. So if you look at that, there's been 20,795 overall, minus 7,839, which is the people who've gone on pension. They're no longer part of the scheme. So overall, there's been 13,000 new memberships in FNPF. As a result of this job growth. And that's in 2017. Inflation, a lot of people talk about, price of things have gone up. But price of things have always gone up everywhere, but you need to look at by how much. That's the main important point. And what are the things that contribute to that? Inflation. Now, generally, when you measure inflation, you have a basket of goods that you look at. There are 3 things that are there, that is alcohol, tobacco and kava. It's also part of measuring inflation. If you look in 2015, the inflation rate was 1.6%, of which kava, alcohol, tobacco was 0.6 contribution. And the other goods was about 1%, which is things like fuel, price of flour, etc. 2016, you can see inflation is 3.9, but the overall contribution of alcohol, tobacco and kava was 2.7%. This is after, of course, the cyclone. A small bunch of bananas in Suva used to cost normally $5, cost $20 after Cyclone Winston. Long beans cost $5. That's the price. That's the impact of cyclones. Of course, kava went through the roof. $140, $200 a kilo, whatever it is. I think it's still at $140 a kilo. A good kava anyway. Some people, of course, drink it at the same rate, despite the price going up. But this is the impact. But the other point is that we have to understand nearly everything that we have in Fiji, basic commodity, is imported. Most of us eat roti, you eat bread in the morning, you have bambakau, you have pancakes, you have cakes, whatever it is. All of that is made out of flour. Where does the flour come from? It comes from wheat. Do we grow wheat? No. FMF and Punja and Sons buy wheat from Australia. The Australians put up the price of wheat, you have no choice. You can't say to them, please bring it down. The only time that we control the price of wheat is when it's brought to Fiji, they crush it, they make flour, then we put price control on flour. That's the only way we control it. But if the input cost is something that we cannot control, if tomorrow the price of wheat goes up by $50, we got no control. We have to pay for it. And the price of bread will go up. The price of flour will go up. The price of fuel, only a few months ago, was about $40 a barrel. Today it sits at about $62 a barrel. In 2008, 2009, the price of fuel was $140 a barrel. That's something we have no control over. Hopefully, we'll discover oil one day. But we don't have it. Until that time, we are subject to the world market prices. So these things are out of our control. And that's, of course, what impacts inflation. A lot of people don't understand debt, foreign reserves. I'm holding this pointer, that screen, that projector. Most of the things that you are wearing on yourself is not made in Fiji. The fabric, this top this lady is wearing, may be sewn in Fiji, but the fabric comes from overseas. If she got hair gel, it's made overseas. When we buy these things from overseas, all these cars that are on the road, all these things, they are made overseas. But when we want to buy them, they don't sell it to us in Fijian dollars. They sell it to us in Japanese yen, US dollars, euros, Australian dollars. So we need to have enough foreign reserves to be able to trade. If you don't have enough foreign reserves, you can't trade. So people say, oh, that country is going bankrupt because they can't trade. The general international benchmark is that you must have 4 months worth, this is the number of months, of foreign reserves to be seen as healthy. So you can see where our foreign reserves were. 2006 it was $515 million, 805 million, etc. So it's gone up to now, it went up to $2.2 billion and $2.1 billion. At the moment, that's our foreign reserves. But what is really interesting is this. You see, I like telling the story, because if you look at this, when we had $1.3 billion, it was worth about 4.5 months worth of trading, right? We have $2.1 billion, but it's worth $4.9 million. Why? Because our economy has grown. So there's been huge demand for goods and services. That takes into account demand for goods and services. Every day in Fiji, as Kamal will tell you, somebody in Fiji is getting connected to the EFL grid. The moment they get connected to the EFL grid, what do? They have electricity now. So they're going to buy a TV. They buy a fridge. They may buy a washing machine. They buy a microwave. They may buy a stereo. They buy phones. All of these things are all made overseas. That means we need more foreign reserves. As we become more wealthier, we have a higher demand for goods and services. When more people can afford cars, when the interest rate is low, more people buy cars. The cars are not made in Fiji, they come from overseas, we need foreign reserves. So even though our foreign reserves has gone up to $2.1 billion, it's about 4.9 months worth of trading. It's a good sign, but also we have to be mindful that our foreign reserves remains high or buoyant. Very quickly I'll talk about debt and then we can finish it off, because I know we have to open up the floor for questions. A lot of people talk about debt. There are two ways of measuring debt. One is a percentage of your GDP. In other words, your overall gross domestic product, what percentage of that is in debt, right? That's a better way of measuring debt, not nominal sum. Nominal sum is the actual figure amount, the actual dollar value. So I'll give you an example. If I have, say, $100 and I go and borrow $20, you would say my debt to GDP ratio is 20%, because 20 of $100 is 20%. Now, assuming that I have $500 and I go and borrow $50, instead of borrowing $20, I borrow $50. And even though I'm now borrowing two and a half times more than what I borrowed before, which is $20, now I'm borrowing $50, my debt to GDP ratio is only 10% because my wealth has increased to $500. So the wealthier you are, you have more capacity to be able to borrow. The question that you need to ask is, why are we borrowing? And what are we borrowing for? That's really the trick. Now, if you can see that our debt to GDP ratio at the moment is 47%. Of course, our nominal debt has gone up to $5.1 billion. These are Fijian dollars. A lot of people don't understand this, but when the Ratu Mara government was formed after independence, the Ratu Mara government borrowed money. Most governments in the world borrow money. And why do you have deficits? It's basically the amount of money you make, you spend more than what you make. Very few countries in the world actually have a balanced budget. Please tell me which country has a balanced budget in recent times. I'd like to know. Now, but the fact of the matter is, when the Ratu Mara government was there, they borrowed money. Then they had a debt. When the Bavandra government came in for about 4 weeks, unfortunately, they also would have borrowed money. And they would have had to pay the debt of the Ratu Mara government. Then the Rambuka government came in. They borrowed money. They pay the debt of the Bavandra government, the Ratu Mara government. Then the Chaudhry government came in. They borrowed money. They borrowed the debt of the Garase government, the Rambuka government, the Bavandra government, the Ratu Mara government. Probably most of the debt of Ratu Mara government would have been paid by now, or some of it. Then of course the Garase government came in. Then they pay the debt of everybody else too. Thankfully in Fiji's case, no government has ever defaulted on any of the debts. Fiji is a country that has never defaulted on any of its loans, which is a good position to be in, irrespective of which government took the loan. Because it's not Ratu Mara that took out the debt, it was the Fijian government that took out the debt. So every time it's the government of Fiji that takes out the debt. So when the Beni Marama government was appointed in 2007, the debt standing then was $2.8 billion. That was the debt that the Beni Marama government inherited from the previous governments. Of course, the Beni Marama government has also incurred debt, and that's the difference. 5.1 to 2.8 billion. That's the amount of debt that the Beni Marama government has actually accumulated itself. So let's look at ourselves compared to other countries. Debt to GDP ratio of Japan is 239.2%. So in other words, the debt level is 239% more than the actual value of the GDP. Ours is only 47%. Singapore is 112%, USA 107%, Canada 92.3%. But nobody says that any of these countries have financial problems. Only some fly-by-night economists in Fiji or would-be overnight economists are saying that. Absolutely no idea of debt and how debt works. So this is where we sit. Now, case in point, you see Australia is 41.1% debt to GDP ratio. As a percent of the GDP is 41.1%. It does not mean that the amount of money that they have as debt is less than Fiji. It's only 41.1% because their economy is much bigger, and I'll show you in the next slide. So you see Japan is 239.2%. What does that mean in dollar terms? This is in US dollars. Japan's debt is 11.8 trillion US dollars. 239.2%. Singapore's debt is 332.7 billion. Now, you can see Singapore is only 332.7 billion, but as a percentage 112%. Why? Because the Singapore economy is much smaller than the Japanese economy. So that's why, even though they have 11.8 trillion, it's 239.2. USA, the total debt is $19.9 trillion. It's the most debt-ridden country in the world from that percentage, in terms of nominal of value, dollar value. 107.4. Fiji sits at a modest $2.47 billion, $2 billion and 47 billion US, 47% of GDP. Now this country is interesting, Mauritius. I was fortunate enough to be there for about 2 days last year. Very similar to Fiji, sugar-based, now tourism-based also. And they decided a few years ago, one opportunity, I suppose, advantage they have over us is they're located to a very large, close by to a very large continent, which is Africa. And Africa is growing very rapidly. It's one of the fastest growing continents in the world with a very young population. So Mauritius took a strategic decision. They're doing exactly what we are doing, but they're doing what we are doing in a much grander scale. They build 4-lane roads everywhere. They put in electricity, water. They set up ICT parks. They traveled the world. They went to all the international companies and said to them, you come and set up your business houses in Mauritius, and you can service Africa from Mauritius. Africa is only 2-3 hours away. And that's precisely what they did. They went to India. They got 3 or 4 Indian hospitals to come in, form a joint venture. So they went to the Africans and said, look, when you want to go for an open heart surgery, don't go to India, come to Mauritius. And after the open heart surgery, you can have 2 weeks holiday with nice tourism hotels. So in that way, they accumulated a lot of debt, $7.5 billion, but it's what you call good debt because it's productive use of money. When you spend money in the right places to increase your productive capacity, then obviously it's a good debt from that perspective. And they're actually doing quite well, actually, as an economy. So just very quickly and lastly, from 1980 to 2006, in the 27 years, the amount of capital expenditure, in other words, the amount of money the government spent in those years to build things, they spent $3.5 billion. These are Fijian dollars. And the debt increased by $2.6 billion. From 2007 up till now, which is about 11 years, we've spent $7 billion, double the amount. But our debt increased by $2.3 billion. Why? Because every time they spent money on capital expenditure in the 27 years, they borrowed 76 cents in every dollar. And we are borrowing only 36 cents. Why? Because we have what we call a net operating surplus. What is that? The net operating surplus is the amount of money we collect as government, and then we of course have to run government. We are here, we may have to, are we paying for the hire of this hall? We're paying for the hiring of this hall, right? We have to pay for the fuel, we have to pay for the salaries of all the teachers and everybody else, the day-to-day running of government. That's what you call your operating expenditure. If you take our revenue and minus our operating expenditure, we have today a savings of about, in this financial year, we'll have a savings of about $1 billion. So when we want to go and build anything, electricity, connect Nambowalu to Draketi or Draketi to various other places, put in roads, before borrowing, we actually use this money, and then when we want to do more things, then we go out and borrow more money. So because of our savings, we have to borrow less. But we are doing double the amount of capital expenditure than ever was done before. That's the advantage of what we have, and that's what we are focused on. You can see how much savings governments were making over here. And then of course it's gone up since 2000, significantly from 2008. There's a dip in 2009, it's continuously gone up. And we are obviously spending more in that area. So, very family-focused budget. It's a responsible budget. We build upon the previous budgets. The economy is on track for 9 consecutive years of growth, and our fiscal position remains the same. It's very strong, sorry, I should say. You can get all of this information, including all these flyers like ECAL, where is the money going to be spent, where roads will be built, which villages will get tanks, all of that, water tanks, electricity, all of that is there. You can go to our website. All that information is available on that website. You can also get this book here. This lays out for you exactly which ministry is getting how much money. So this page that I've just opened, it says Ministry of Education, Heritage and Arts, Program 4, Activity 2, which is Curriculum Development, Education Resources Center. So how much money are we paying salaries in that section? How much wage earners salary is there? How much money they're getting for purchase of goods and services? They're getting $3 million. You can see everything here. And then of course this is what gets audited. So if you want to know more information, all of that is available on the website. You can go to one of the Wi-Fi hotspots. It won't cost you that much money. Get very high speeds and you can actually download all of that information. So ladies and gentlemen, I have a lot more information, but I thought I'll just end now, and then we can open up the floor if you have any questions. Please feel free to ask any question. Don't hesitate. Whatever question you want to ask, nothing is too silly or too hard. Please feel free to do that. This is your time.